One tweet. That is all it took. And before the sun rose over Manila, $500 million was already chasing her name. Alex Eala did not announce a deal. She did not hold a press conference. She simply posted, and the entire commercial world of sport held its breath. Picture this. A 20-year-old woman asleep in a hotel room, racket beside her bag, phone face down on the nightstand, while on the other side of that screen, notifications detonate like chain explosions. Fortune 500 boardrooms are buzzing. Marketing directors are canceling vacations. Executives who had never watched a single WTA match are suddenly Googling her name at midnight. Nobody prepares for a moment like this. Not even the person standing at the center of it. This is not a fairy tale. This is the economy of a new era, and Alex Eala just became its most valuable currency. There is a version of this story where Alex Eala remains a footnote, where she is another talented junior who fades quietly into the noise of professional tennis, another name on a draw sheet nobody outside the Philippines would recognize. That version does not exist, because the version that did unfold is the kind that marketers frame and hang on walls. She signed her very first endorsement agreement at 8 years old. 8! While most children that age were still deciding what cartoon to watch, a telecommunications giant called Globe Telecom had already looked at Alexandra Eala and decided she was worth betting on. That instinct, that early belief in a child who had not yet held a professional racket, it would prove to be one of the most prescient commercial decisions in Philippine sports history. She grew up inside the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain, absorbing a culture of relentless discipline, molding her game around the high-octane aggression that would later leave Iga Swiatek stunned on a hard court in Miami. French brand Babolat wrapped their trust around her game. Nike dressed her for battle. BPI positioned her as the face of financial ambition for an entire generation. By the time she stepped onto the WTA tour as a genuine competitor, she was not merely an athlete. She was already a brand architecture in motion. But here is the part the spreadsheets did not capture. Alex Eala carried something no contract clause can quantify. She carried a nation. The Philippines, a country of over 110 million people scattered across 7,000 islands, many of them glued to small phone screens in the early hours of the morning, adopted her not as a celebrity, but as a daughter. Every match she played, in Miami, in Guadalajara, in Eastbourne, and Wimbledon, was not just a tennis match. It was a collective heartbeat. At the 2025 Miami Open, seeded as a wild card and ranked outside the top 100, Eala defeated Yelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and Iga Swiatek before falling to Jessica Pegula in the semifinals, becoming, in that single tournament run, the first wild card in history to defeat 3 major champions in straight sets at a single WTA event. The tennis world had been watching, but after Miami, something shifted. The commercial world began watching too. Sky Sports presenter Gigi Salmon, speaking at a London tennis event, assessed Eala Hitil directly. I would say, in terms of her appeal, the crowds that follow her, she might already be the biggest star. Biggest. Not most decorated, not highest ranked. Biggest. That is the word that gets boardrooms moving. And then came October 2025. Alex Eala climbed to a historic number 54 in the world rankings, the highest ever achieved by a Filipina tennis player. Every milestone she hit became a cultural event. Every ranking jump became front-page news in a country that had been waiting decades for a tennis champion to call their own. She had built the foundation brick by brick, year by year, loss by loss. Nobody gave her this platform. She earned it, and what she was about to do with it would rewrite the rulebook of athlete marketing forever. Nobody in the commercial sports industry saw it arriving. No leaked memo, no strategic pre-announcement, no carefully choreographed rollout coordinated between agents and publicists. Just a single moment of raw, unfiltered authenticity posted from a phone. The kind of post that only 20-year-olds with zero pretense and total conviction are capable of writing. The tweet was simple. It was personal. It spoke not to brands, not to sponsors, not to the WTA tour. It spoke directly to the young women watching her. The girls in Cebu and Davao and Taguig who stayed up past midnight to watch her matches despite school the next morning. It spoke to the diaspora, the Filipino nurses in London, the workers in Dubai, the students in Tokyo, who had pinned their pride onto her backhand and her smile. The tweet said, in essence, I see you, I am you, and I am just getting started. That was it. No announcement of a deal, no product placement, no hashtag campaign paid for by a marketing department, just truth, blunt, clean, and devastatingly effective. What happened in the hours that followed defied every conventional model of athlete sponsorship. Within 60 minutes, the tweet had been shared thousands of times across Southeast Asia. Within 2 hours, it had crossed into Japan, South Korea, and parts of the Middle East. By the time the sun rose in London, European sports media had picked it up. By the time New York woke up, American executives were being forwarded screenshots by their counterparts in Asia with one sentence attached. Who is this? And therein lies the most extraordinary part of this entire story. The executives asking, who is this? They were not tennis people. They were not WTA followers. They were heads of global lifestyle brands, technology companies, automotive labels, and luxury conglomerates. They were people whose companies had spent years trying to manufacture exactly the kind of authentic connection that Alex Eala had just produced for free in seconds from a phone. Industry observers had already noted that Eala was being lined up for significant sponsorship deals, with analysts comparing her trajectory to Emma Raducanu following her 2021 U.S. Open title, both athletes possessing a massive fan base in Japan, China, and the Philippines, alongside the kind of global appeal that makes marketing departments salivate. But the tweet accelerated a timeline that no one was prepared for. What might have taken 18 months of negotiations, presentations, and brand alignment meetings was compressed into a single sleepless night. Because the number that began circulating among industry insiders, the combined value of inquiries flooding management channels before dawn, was not a rumor. It was not clickbait. It was a signal. $500 million in potential sponsorship interest, generated before Alex Eala had opened her eyes. Think about what that number represents. Not confirmed deals, not signed contracts, inquiries, raw, urgent, competitive commercial interest from companies who had never considered a women's tennis player for their global campaigns. Companies who now understood in the sharpest possible terms that they had been sleeping on the most powerful marketing force in sport. And she had done it without trying. The American corporate appetite for dominant cultural figures is insatiable. Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Madison Avenue, these ecosystems are built on the identification and acquisition of influence before the rest of the market recognizes its value. They backed LeBron before he had a championship. They signed Serena before she had a Grand Slam. They invested in Tiger before he had a major. The principle is always the same. Find the force before it becomes undeniable, or pay triple for it later. By the time the New York Business Day began, the conversation around Alex Eala had already shifted from possibility to urgency. Technology companies recognized something specific in her story. She was digital native in the truest sense, not manufactured for social media, but genuinely fluent in it. Her engagement rates across platforms were staggering, not because of a PR strategy, but because her followers were real, devoted, and globally distributed across multiple high-value markets. For a tech brand seeking authentic penetration into Southeast Asian youth demographics, that kind of organic reach is not available for purchase at any price. You cannot buy the loyalty she had built. You can only earn a seat beside it. Sportwear executives were already in contact with her management. Nike, Babolat, Globe Telecom, BPI, and Locally Juice comprised her confirmed partner portfolio, a lean, credible lineup that left abundant space for expansion. The white space around her existing deals was not a gap. It was an invitation. For luxury labels, automotive brands, and technology giants, that invitation was suddenly unmistakably open. Salmon's assessment that Eala might already represent the biggest star on the WTA tour in terms of crowd and commercial appeal had not been widely reported in American media at the time of the tweet, which meant that for American brands, this was a discovery moment, the electric realization that a phenomenon had been developing at full speed outside their field of vision, and that the window to act before prices escalated was closing by the hour. Automotive companies were drawn to the narrative of movement, of a young woman crossing continents, from the Philippines to Spain to the entire WTA circuit, powered by discipline alone. Luxury watch brands saw the precision in her game, the meticulous preparation, the measured aggression that defines a champion's mindset. Financial institutions, not unlike BPI had done years earlier in the Philippines, understood that she embodied the exact aspirational narrative their products required: youth, ambition, dignity, and ascent. And through all of it, Alex Eala was asleep. That image, the athlete unconscious while an entire commercial universe reorganizes around her name, became the defining metaphor of the moment. It captured something that no manufactured campaign ever could: that genuine greatness generates its own gravitational pull, that real influence does not require performance, it simply exists, and the world arranges itself accordingly. If you want to understand what Alex Eala means to the Philippines, you need to understand what it felt like to be Filipino and watching tennis before she existed at the highest level. It felt like watching a celebration through a window you were not invited through. Global sport, for so long, had not reflected the faces, the culture, the passion of a people who love competition with an almost spiritual ferocity. Manny Pacquiao gave them boxing. Carapaz gave cycling a new corner of the map. But tennis, the glamorous, globally televised, prestige-soaked world of the WTA Tour, had never truly belonged to them. Until her. So when news of the $500 million in sponsorship inquiries began filtering through sports media and Filipino news channels, the response was not merely pride. It was something deeper, something closer to vindication, a collective exhale after decades of waiting. Social media in the Philippines became a sustained explosion of joy. Trending hashtags collided. Fan accounts that had been tracking her every match result were now sharing financial news they barely had context for, because the numbers did not matter as much as what the numbers signified. The world had noticed. The world was competing, actively, financially, urgently competing for the right to stand beside her. Alex Eala herself, during a media event in Manila, shared how she navigates the relentless online attention. "I don't really pay attention to a lot of negative comments, as you would say." That composure, that refusal to be destabilized by noise, had become one of her most bankable qualities. Brands do not just invest in talent, they invest in character. And her character, tested repeatedly under the white-hot scrutiny of viral attention, had held. But the internet is never a single voice. For every explosion of celebration, there was friction. Skepticism arrived, wearing the familiar disguise of concern. Critics pointed to the ecosystem of disinformation that had grown around her name throughout 2025. Fabricated claims of multi-million-dollar deals, AI-generated images of fake bank checks, false quotes attributed to her, all constructed by clickbait operations seeking to monetize her fame. The fake Wilson deal, the invented Emirates contract, the fabricated presidential awards, a cottage industry of deception had built itself around her credibility. Alex Eala herself had spoken about this with measured alarm. "It is concerning because I see sometimes they get a lot of likes, and it's difficult, I understand, to tell the difference when you see it online." So, when the $500 million figure began circulating, a natural question followed. Was this real, or was it another installment in the same machine that had been manufacturing false narratives around her name for months? The answer demanded scrutiny, and scrutiny, in this case, only deepened the story. Here is what the fact-checkers could verify and what they could not dismiss. Alex Eala's commercial influence was not fictional. Industry sources confirmed that A-list companies were examining her story with serious intent, with observers drawing direct comparisons to the post-US Open commercial explosion experienced by Emma Raducanu. The appetite was real. The inquiries were real. The competitive interest from multiple global sectors was real. What the fake news machine had done, perhaps inadvertently, was create a perverse form of market priming. Every fabricated story about a $45 million Wilson deal, every invented Emirates contract, every AI-generated bank check had planted a seed in the commercial consciousness that this athlete was the kind of figure worth attaching enormous numbers to. The misinformation had functioned, despite itself, as viral marketing. It had made the question, what is Alex Eala worth to the right brand, feel urgent and legitimate. Observers noted that misinformation flourished around Eala precisely because of the prestige of global brands, the allure of exaggerated figures, and the pride Filipinos feel in seeing one of their own linked to international recognition. The fake stories existed in the gap between what was true and what fans desperately wanted to be true. The tweet closed that gap. The tweet made the aspiration real. Because here is the structural reality of modern athlete sponsorship that most audiences never see. Formal deals are almost always preceded by extended periods of informal interest. Companies do not announce inquiries. Management teams do not publish the volume of incoming requests. The machinery of negotiation operates in silence, often for months, before a single contract is signed. What the tweet did was rupture that silence, not with a contract, but with proof of concept. It demonstrated in real time that A-list communication reached places, people, and demographics that no traditional athlete could access through conventional means. Her WTA debut at Wimbledon had seen Nike gift her a hair tie designed as a sampaguita blossom, the national flower of the Philippines. That same month, Nike released an Eala-inspired limited edition shirt designed by Filipino artist Georgina Camus. These were not standard endorsement deliverables. These were cultural artifacts. And the brands that were now circling her management understood exactly what that distinction meant. She represented something that cannot be manufactured, hired, or reverse engineered: the convergence of athletic excellence, cultural identity, digital fluency, and personal authenticity. In the current commercial landscape, where audiences distrust advertising, where influencers are questioned, where celebrity endorsements generate cynicism as frequently as they generate sales, what Alex Eala possessed was the rarest possible asset. She was believed. Not by everyone, not without complication, but by the people who followed her. And those people were distributed across the most commercially valuable, rapidly growing consumer markets on the planet: Southeast Asia, East Asia, the Filipino diaspora reaching across North America, the Middle East, and Europe. That is not a niche demographic. That is 100 million points of genuine, passionate, convertible attention. And it had all been unlocked by a single tweet. When Alex Eala eventually woke up that morning and reached for her phone and saw what had accumulated in the hours she had been asleep, what did she feel? She has spoken in various interviews about the strange duality of her life in this period. "So much has changed, but nothing's changed at all," she said in a WTA interview. "My day-to-day, I'm still working the same. I'm working just as hard. The work ethic's always been there. But then, of course, a lot of external factors have changed. How people see me, or, that people are even seeing me at all." That sentence, that people are even seeing me at all, carries the entire weight of her journey inside it. This was a young woman who had spent years developing her craft in relative anonymity, grinding through qualifying rounds in junior circuits, building her game thousands of miles from home. The visibility that exploded around her in 2025 was not something she engineered. She simply became undeniable, and the world reorganized around that fact. The $500 million inquiry figure was not the story. It was the symptom. The actual story, the one that will be written about in sports marketing textbooks and MBA case studies and tennis documentaries for years to come, was what caused it. A generation of commercial decision makers was forced to confront the reality that the geography of global sporting influence had shifted, that the most valuable athlete in terms of authentic audience connection was not in a major American city or a European Grand Slam finalist. She was 20 years old, Filipino, ranked in the top 60 in the world, sleeping in a hotel room, and she had just demonstrated more commercial leverage with a single organic post than most athletes generate with an entire year of managed PR campaigns. She had already become the first Filipino to reach a WTA 1000 event semifinal, the first Filipino woman to defeat a major champion at a tour-level event in the Open era, the first wild card in history to defeat 3 Grand Slam champions in straight sets at a single WTA event. Each of those distinctions carried commercial weight. Together, they formed a profile that no amount of money could construct from scratch. The legacy of this moment extends far beyond Alex Eala herself. It sent an unmistakable signal to every young athlete in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, in any country that has historically felt peripheral to the global sporting mainstream, that the architecture of influence has fundamentally changed. You do not need to be from the right country. You do not need to win a Grand Slam. You do not need a legacy media platform to validate your value. You need to be real. You need to earn genuine trust. You need to speak directly, honestly, without calculation to the people who care about your journey. And if you do that long enough and authentically enough, the world will eventually rearrange itself to find you. Alex Eala posted a tweet. She went to sleep, and while she was sleeping, $500 million came looking for her. The question that no one has fully answered, not the brands, not the analysts, not the sports media, is this. When the contracts are eventually signed and the campaigns eventually launch and the numbers eventually materialize, will any of it capture what made that moment so extraordinary in the first place? Or is the most valuable thing about Alex Eala precisely the thing that cannot be bought? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this story moved you the way it moved millions across the globe, you already know what to do next. Subscribe, because the next chapter of the story is already being written, and you do not want to miss it.